not just about technology. It's also about the systems within the business, the existing equipment that they have, but also fundamentally the stuff that really makes a difference is around the people in the business. What are their skills? What are their attitudes to digital? So we go into culture. It's around leadership. Is there real leadership support in the business for making a difference at all levels? And of course, then it's also about suppliers and about customers, because for an end-to-end improvement in productivity, resilience, and sustainability, you've got to involve your partners as well. So a whole range of things. And digital readiness brings those together. The complexity of making digital work within a business can be reduced dramatically by having a good understanding of those dimensions of people, of leadership, of technology, of customers, and of suppliers. And that's really what digital readiness helps to do. Keep people focused on the things that matter and help them to monitor and make progress in the areas that are really going to make a difference to them.
Made to Grow, the podcast for SME manufacturers, brought to you by FlowLens, the simple, affordable MRP system. Over 10 episodes, we've got a host of experienced manufacturers, industry thought leaders, and subject matter experts sharing their personal stories and professional insights to help you on your manufacturing success story. So, stay tuned and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts for a new episode every fortnight. This week, we're talking about a subject which is close to my own heart and the hearts of everyone here at FlowLens: digital transformation in manufacturing. While I could wax lyrical on the subject for days myself, I'm always happy to hear from other perspectives and to learn from my more knowledgeable peers. One such expert is this week's guest, Dr. Stephen Barr, a designer, engineer and sustainable manufacturing specialist who is also MD of Edge Digital Manufacturing, a specialist consultancy supporting UK manufacturers on their journey to digital transformation. Let's jump in.
So welcome Stephen Barr from Edge Digital Manufacturing. Thanks for joining us today. Stephen has an illustrious career, an engineer by background, but spearheading probably, for 2 decades, productivity and improvements across the manufacturing sector, probably longer, maybe doing you a disservice there, Stephen. So I'm really delighted to have you on board and as a guest on the podcast, because
thanks, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
The breadth of your experience is significant. So could you just elaborate on that and correct any of my timing assumptions there, and give the guys a bit of an overview of your career, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Oh, goodness. Well, look, I have indeed been working in manufacturing for a rather long time. I'm an engineer, a designer, I suppose, by background. And I suppose I've been working for half of my career, something like that, so about 15 years or so, specifically in manufacturing, mostly with manufacturing customers. So I work a lot with business leaders of small, medium, and large size companies, mostly in the UK. And we've been lucky enough over the last 5 years or so with Edge Digital Manufacturing, which I founded with Ravi Goodhamal, to work with many hundreds of companies, particularly smaller companies, through programs like Made Smarter, and also with the new Digital Supply Chain Hub and the Smart Manufacturing Data Hub. So a good deal of work through programs, but also private work as well. And the thing that really excites me, it gets me out of bed, as you were saying, is helping business leaders with the genuine problems that they're wrestling with. So a whole range of things around skill shortages, supply chain difficulties caused by all sorts of things, customer demand fluctuations, energy costs, and an increasing awareness of the need for carbon emissions reduction if we're all going to play our part in solving the environmental crisis. So those are things that really do excite me, energize me, and hopefully I can bring some of that to the people that I work with.
Happy days, yeah. I think it's a major feat, sort of digital transformation. So it needs energy, it needs passion, it needs commitment, because there are still a lot of people there that either just don't have the time or maybe the belief in it just yet. So yeah, thank you for joining us, Stephen. So, what we started talking about before we went on air is the concept of digital readiness, and you with others have developed a sort of digital readiness framework for companies to assess actually where they are and benchmark where they are. And from personal experience, we find that companies that have a really good feel for what stage of development they're at, where their business goals are going to take them, and the kind of appetite within the business for change. Those are the companies that will actually succeed because of a more realistic approach to the transformation, and they're going into it with their eyes open. You've developed this DRL system. Can you elaborate on that and the impact that has?
Yeah, sure. So a tiny bit of background. So Ravi and I were the technical authors of a British standard on digital readiness in manufacturing back in 2019. And it built on work that we had been doing with the Digital Catapult, with High Value Manufacturing Catapult, Knowledge Transfer Network, and other partners to get a sort of cross-industry way of helping companies, not just SMEs, but the whole manufacturing sector, to really move forward with key things that were stopping folks investing in data and digital. And business leaders can often struggle with questions of, where do we start? And even if we have started, how do we move forward quickly enough to satisfy a business case, in particular business objectives that we've got? And then how much digitalization is actually appropriate for the business? So digital readiness helps leaders to get their heads around the whole panoply of things that they're going to need to get right. So it's not just about tech. I mean, we all know that. It's not just about technology. It's also about the systems within the business, the existing equipment that they have, but also fundamentally the stuff that really makes a difference is around the people in the business. What are their skills? What are their attitudes to digital? So we go into culture. It's around leadership. Is there real leadership support in the business for making a difference at all levels? And of course, then it's also about suppliers and about customers, because for an end-to-end improvement in productivity, resilience, and sustainability, you've got to involve your partners as well. So a whole range of things, and digital readiness brings those together. The standard, the British standard, PAS 1040, available in all good bookshops and eBay in particular, and the BSI website. That expresses 10 different dimensions. Now, I have to say that's not the only way to do it. And in fact, the digital readiness tool that we've developed has 10 dimensions, but other tools are available. I'm not necessarily just pitching the Edge digital readiness tool, although it's worth knowing that that's deployed across. We wrote the standard, but actually more importantly, it's got real traction. So roughly 1,000 users have entered their self-scores in the system, and it's being used across 4 Made Smarter regions and 2 Made Smarter innovation hubs, the Digital Supply Chain Innovation Hub and the Smart Manufacturing Data Innovation Hub. So it's got real traction in the industry.
That's excellent. And it's great for that sort of social proof, as marketers would call it, because I think there's that suspicion about digital, and even giving away information is something that manufacturers can be reluctant to do, in my experience, because they rightly have IP and whatnot, but many share similar operational difficulties and challenges and opportunities. So having that kind of that social proof makes it a more compelling thing to try out. So, talking then about the outputs of that, once you've had somebody kind of self report their status or their readiness, how do you then execute on that, given all those different dimensions?
Yeah, so there are key things here. One of the first things that it will do, if you simply enter your scores in the app, then it will give you a benchmark against other users of the tool. And as I mentioned, we have something like 1,000 users now, so that benchmark data set is increasing all the time. And that benchmark is useful in itself against companies of a similar size, of similar sectors. But not just that, it also gives you a way of tracking over time. So we find that users are using this multiple times, which is exactly what we had intended. So over the course of time, because of course you don't simply want to have a view of how good, bad, indifferent you were at the beginning of a journey. You need to recognize that it is a journey of digital transformation, and you'd kind of want to know how you're getting on. And another part of this is it's not just about individuals. It's about let's say, a group perspective of what's going on in the business. As we know, it involves everybody from the shop floor up to board level, often, to really deliver on digital transformation. And I guess, as many of us know, transformation projects of any kind, particularly those involving IT, are not necessarily the most successful projects that a business will go into. And part of the reason is that people lose their way. People were perhaps not focused enough in the first place, but certainly being able to keep on track, we find really important. And users of the tool are also finding that an advantage to just keep focused on the things that really matter.
Particularly from the SME side of things, companies at the smaller end of the scale can only really do one thing at a time, other than keep the day job going or keeping the business as usual running. So, helping to prioritize and understand either where low hanging fruit would be, or where the biggest kind of win through a digital project might be is something that the tool would offer.
Well, the tool itself, bear in mind, is an enabler. The tool itself doesn't deliver. What it does do is to provide key information to allow business leaders at all levels of business to do what they need to do, which is to keep focused on all the aspects that are really important in moving forward with digital tech to deliver productivity, resilience, and sustainability. So the real outcomes that you want to measure are, of course, those improvements. The tool itself measures your readiness to deliver those improvements. The way we do it is to provide a score from 0 to 9, similar to technology readiness level or manufacturing readiness level. That was the analogy there. So you can see how a business is moving forward from early stage, low level of awareness of what's possible to where you really want to get to, which is making the best possible use of digital technologies in the context of your business, which might not necessarily be a 9 in every category, but it's certainly moving from 1 towards 9. And it is important that we recognize that every business is different and not everyone needs to end up as a smart factory, but certainly that's the direction of travel that we encourage.
The Made to Grow podcast is brought to you by FlowLens, the simple, affordable MRP system specifically designed for SME device, equipment and machinery manufacturers. Our top-rated cloud-based software can help you cut down on wasted materials, time and money, and eliminate the chaos of running your manufacturing with spreadsheets and hope. Our customers have reported savings of over a day per week per person in their business by cutting out needless admin, duplication of work and countless mistakes. Plus, lead times are shortened by up to 75%. And after hundreds of successful implementations, we've got the blueprint for manufacturing success nailed down. Head over to flowlens.com for a quick video tour of the software and to hear from more manufacturers like you who have transformed their businesses with FlowLens. Now, back to the interview.
You talked there earlier about the people aspect and getting people bought into change. Using the information you get from the digital readiness, how do you go about when you engage with a customer to then translate that into the hearts and minds of the people across the business?
Yes, that's a really good question. And some businesses just use the tool and they not only self-assess, but they try to be self-sufficient as well. What works really effectively is working with an advisor, and I'm thinking here of Made Smarter programs especially, and local enterprise partnership programs as well for business support, where advisors are employed and funded to work directly with manufacturing business leaders, and Edge Digital Manufacturing does quite a lot of that work as well as providing the digital readiness tool. So the point is that there's an advisor there, a real expert in manufacturing and digital technologies, who can help the business leaders actually to make sense of their position. So quite often we see very low scores or very high scores, and both of those are quite thought-provoking. if very high scores tend to mean people are rather over-optimistic. You could imagine that the head of IT might well have a view about how effective the IT systems are in the business. We take that with a pinch of salt until we've actually talked to the business and helped them really think through what evidence they have, what they need to be doing in the future as opposed to the past. And that's not just a conversation one-to-one, it's one-to-many within the business. So collaboration is a key thing. I hope what I'm emphasizing here is that the advisor role is really very important here. We're not doing away with that industry expertise, but we're giving companies a way of getting into it more quickly.
Yeah, I think it creates a level of literacy where there might not be literacy, and it also creates probably an honest broker kind of approach to, as you say, people will have bias towards their role and their achievements and what they think is working well, and that sort of old adage of we've done that, we've always done it that way. For some people, it's just set in stone. It takes a bit of challenge and an advisory kind of third party to come in and say, or just ask. I call them stupid questions, but they're not necessarily that stupid. But challenging the status quo, and I suppose having the benchmark alongside that engagement across the business is a really important way to challenge kind of calcified thinking.
It's interesting you mentioned there's no such thing as a stupid question. I know that's a bit of a cliche to say that, but really, in all the years we've been doing this, I've learned so much by working with manufacturing business leaders. They've obviously learnt as well from each other, as well as from what I've had to say and what advisors have to say. It is a learning experience, and that's really what digital transformation is all about. You try things out, you see how they work, you learn, you engage with a wider group of people, and things begin to snowball and things really begin to get traction. So that's, I think, a really encouraging feature of what digital readiness can help people to do within a business. Yeah.
Kind of following on from that, in terms of skills, kind of digital skills for manufacturing is, it's quite a niche area, albeit we've had MRP and so on. We've had these systems for decades, but the evolution of those obviously carries on, and the lack of those skills seems to remain a problem. How do you see manufacturers tackling that kind of skills gap, particularly the smaller ones where their budget for training is limited, or their capacity to bring in additional resource with outside experience beyond the advisory piece? How would you recommend people overcome that gap?
Well, then let's face it, skills development, particularly digital skills, remains one of the great barriers to progress here. And it is something that government is attending to. But businesses themselves can take an initiative, indeed are taking initiative, working through communities within their local regions can make a big difference, because you can spot ways of getting support for improving digital tech. So all sorts of organizations are providing those digital skills. Sometimes it's a question of funding, but quite often it's a question of finding them and getting access to them. So working with Made Smarter, for example, working with growth hubs, working with other organizations locally, even chambers of commerce, I found, are very adept at pointing organizations towards digital skills training programs. But funding is always going to be an issue. And of course, finding raw recruits to come into the business who already have those digital skills. That is another related fundamental problem that is challenging the industry. It isn't going to change overnight, but businesses and government both have a role to play there, local and national government.
Yeah, it is good that it has been recognised. It just seems to be taking a long time for it to turn into something tangible that accessible by enough manufacturers.
Yes, and I would recommend that people have a look at the Made Smarter website, but also the Digital Supply Chain Hub. So that's dsch.co, dsch.uk, and also the Smart Manufacturing Data Hub. as well. So both of those, all three of those, are recommended sources for training in digital skills.
So thinking then more about the customer journey and those different stakeholders, again, how do you engage with a business to kind of map that out and decide? You've got your readiness score, your benchmark, you've looked at your customer journey, and then how do you take that to the next step of deciding what to do?
So the core business of Edge Digital Manufacturing is around road mapping, if we call it that in the broadest sense. So what I mean by that is helping business leaders to really focus on the challenges that they have as a business. If you like, the options or the possibilities for using data and digital technologies to help them break through to solve those challenges, and then moving forward to actually road mapping, setting out key steps and the progress of those over time. So we, as Edge Digital Manufacturing, organize that often as sort of 2 half-day workshops or several larger workshops, depends on the number of people and the size of the business. But that's been very successful in terms of helping companies to get their heads around what's really going to make a difference and actually to become convinced about the business case for moving forward. And then we can also introduce them, if they're not already involved, with a program that could help them to fund those improvements whenever those funding opportunities come up, which is not always the case. So which is why we work privately as well as through public sector programs of all shapes and sizes around the country.
Yeah, the funding kind of landscape it's kind of congealing, but it's still a bit fragmented in terms of where you can access funding and what you can access it for, depending where you are in the country.
Yes, congealing is a slightly unfortunate word, isn't it? But I know what you mean. Developing, evolving, yes. And it doesn't help that the European funding has come to an end, and we are still waiting for, regions at least are still waiting for the next generation of regional funding, which government has promised, and it's still in the process of rolling out. We'll see what happens there. But other funds, as I've mentioned a couple of times, the the Digital Supply Chain Hub, DSCH, and the Smart Manufacturing Data Hub, SMDH. The first run out of Digital Catapult, the second one out of Ulster University. Both of those have funding right now for the next couple of years. So there are opportunities there, perhaps, for companies to find some support.
Mm-hmm. I think whenever you sort of take the sector as a whole, and we talk about the productivity gap that we have with some of our major kind of international competitors, and you see what's the opportunity on the ground there to make such a difference. It's just giving companies that extra bit of headroom, that extra bit of capacity and breathing space to take a step back and look at the opportunities for improvement is something that could propel the UK to where it rightfully should be, I suppose, because of the quality of the manufacturing, the quality of the innovation is let down by the kind of productivity gap. But at least Rome wasn't built in a day, and we can these initiatives will chip away at it.
And right now, post-pandemic, let's face it, all of us need as much help as we can to get businesses back on track. And UK manufacturing was already behind the gain line and has slipped back further, as you've kind of indicated there, in the last few years. But there's no doubt that British manufacturing, UK manufacturing, has amazing potential to boost UK trade, to be hugely successful in world markets, poised, if you like, for that great leap forward. Digital technologies, data and digital technologies, I think everybody recognizes have an enormous role to play, not just in productivity, but in sustainability as well, because energy reductions, energy use can also be improved through the same digital technologies that you're using to boost productivity. These are not different things. They're part of a spectrum of improvements in the business. So all of that is really, really encouraging. But yes, let's get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the URL? Where can people find the Digital Readiness tool to kind of take the first step?
Well, as I mentioned, it's available through a number of platforms, but probably the easiest thing to do is get in touch directly with Edge Digital Manufacturing, and we can then put people in touch with the appropriate program and indeed help ourselves. So I'm just going to mention an email address, which is probably the easiest thing. So that's info@edge-digital.co.uk, info@edge-digital.co.uk. That would be the best way to get moving forward as quickly as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. And just to sort of summarize, I think when we started our business 19 years ago almost, we were in the infancy of cloud applications, and the potential there to particularly with businesses that were trading internationally or operating across multiple sites was evident. And getting involved with people on the ground and bringing together those stakeholders was something that we were really passionate about early on in terms of the quality of the solution. And that was before we even built FlowLens. Fast forward down 10 years when we started, we saw the opportunity to create a platform for SMEs. The same kind of issues were there. So it's fantastic to have a standard and a tool that people can rely upon that's not just vendor-led marketing propaganda. So I would therefore heartily recommend that any manufacturer, as you say, who's maybe already tried some digital transformation, maybe been successful, maybe not, and obviously those who haven't started down that track, take that first step and get a benchmark. But if you'd leave our listeners with one kind of crystal clear, actionable piece of advice as they go about their day and think about this and what we've discussed, what would that be, Stephen?
Well, the key you've already mentioned there, that this is really all about helping companies to start, to keep going, and to know what's appropriate for their business in terms of data and digital. But the fundamental thing out of all of this is to take heart that the complexity of making digital work within a business can be reduced dramatically by having a good understanding of those dimensions of people, of leadership, of technology, of customers, and of suppliers. And that's really what digital readiness helps to do. Keep people focused on the things that matter and help them to monitor and make progress in the areas that are really going to make a difference to them, to deliver productivity, resilience, and sustainability. So hope is out there. The data and digital technologies to make a difference are out there. And I think we can really say that digital readiness is making a great difference, a great impact in the industry, judging by those thousands of users who've been using the tool.
Brilliant. Well, we'll be sharing it far and wide on our channels. Stephen, thanks again for taking part. I really value your input, and we look forward to further conversations in the future, perhaps, as we see how things evolve in the industry.
Yeah, happy to do that. It's been great. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to say something about digital readiness and Made Smarter as well. Great things are happening out there.
Brilliant. Here's to that. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks again to Stephen for his time, and it was certainly worthwhile listening to the man who was the literal author of the standard on digital transformation. It was interesting to hear Stephen echoing something said by my previous guests who have focused on process mapping and systems implementation. The actual technology, the hardware or software involved in digital transformation is only one element of a successful process. Everything begins and ends with people, from business leaders with the vision to see the potential, to shop floor team members who need to feel the benefits digital can bring to their work. Bringing your people along on the journey is emerging as one of the key lessons from the first series of Made to Grow. In the next episode, I'll be talking with Mark Tooby, Chartered Accountant and Virtual Finance Director to multiple SME manufacturers. Mark plays a vital role in helping small manufacturers in the northwest of England to analyse their business and identify the right suite of technology to help improve their sales, production and financial functions. Mark shares his process and gives us some key insights on the common pitfalls of systems implementation, including his perspectives as a Goal Zero partner. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. If you find this useful, please consider rating and reviewing Made to Grow on your podcast platform of choice. Till next time.